postponed, and I realized that it becomes a long day for you. My name is Susan Gagliano. I am a professional counselor and a teacher trainer in Erasmus KA1 Mobilities with a center that's called Europass Teacher Academy, where I train teachers of all different educational levels and all different subjects in basically topics that are regarding soft skills. So emotional intelligence, social intelligence, stress management, burnout prevention, and as
Susan,
yes,
can you teach forgiveness? Because the last lecture.
I definitely, we could definitely talk about that. Today, it's interesting following the lecture from before, because today is kind of it gets into a subtopic, let's say, of what we were talking about. We're talking today about healthy boundaries. When I'm not teaching at Europass Teacher Academy, I have a private counseling practice where I have the pleasure and the privilege of working with a lot of young people, university age. And at this point, I have worked with students from probably 20 different countries, giving me a very unique access to what it is that is going on in your world right now. And this topic of healthy boundaries is one that I find comes up over and over again as being something that we don't realize that it has an enormous impact on our well-being. And so basically, what I wanted to do is, first of all, a lot of the information from this lecture will be on the slides, but of course, lots of things are going to just happen in the next hour and a half, 2 hours together. And so I recommend for any of you who are watching the recording to please watch the recording, because the assignment will also be connected to things that are happening in the next couple of hours. And let's see here. One thing that I wanted to ask you is, I think a lot of us are going to be going to Chania, and I wanted to know, as you're sitting here thinking about this trip, okay, that you're about to take, you're about to, most likely, I think you're all going to be taking airplanes. And my question is, what is it what are your thoughts? What are your emotions and expectations when you imagine meeting all together with Costas as our...
This is exactly what we think, to meet me.
Exactly. Finally, to meet him in person. And if you wouldn't mind just sharing in the chat, what kinds of emotions or expectations or thoughts, hopes are you thinking about regarding this trip, this upcoming time together in just 10 days, 11 days? Oh, yes. Hunger for souvlaki, as Costas promised, excitement, yeah, a new experience. Yes, because you've seen each other a bit in these lectures, in these breakout rooms, and it's a totally different thing to be together in a three-dimensional way. Okay. Yay, yes. Can't wait to meet Costas. That's right. He is the celebrity. He's the guy everyone wants to meet. He is Mr. Internationalization. Yes, excited to meet everyone and to go to a country I've never been to before. Yes, Alex. Oh, you'll love it. And this year, it's going to be it's about 2 weeks later than it was last year. And maybe we can even go for a swim. Excitement and mainly happy to finally relax for a bit. Absolutely. And Lucia agrees with Wojtek. Maya's excited to meet new people from fascinated places. Yeah. And I'm excited to see some old friends and to make some new friends. A lot has happened in this year, and I'm really looking forward to being able to be able to chat and get my fingers on the pulse of how everyone's doing.
I'm looking forward for Tatiana to bring me more chocolates.
To bring?
Chocolates.
Yeah,
But look,
absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, thank you for that. And I will now move on to sharing the screen. All right, let's see. Percent. So I see that we're all pretty excited to go, and it's a beautiful island and with wonderful people. And I really appreciate everything that Costas does to organize these experiences for us. It's just taking a moment to completely upload. There we go. Okay. So thinking about these boundaries, healthy boundaries, and assertive communication, I wanted to, as I mentioned, this is a picture of us in Hanya last year with some of the friends that I made while I was there. And of course, there were lots of others, but this was a particularly beautiful picture that we took on the evening that we had the dinner that was for everyone. And so I want to say hi to Samia, Noga, Agnieszka, and Elad. And I'm originally from the United States. I have lived in Italy for my entire adult life, though, in Florence. And I have my BA in English literature from Boston College, trained in professional counseling here in Italy, trained as a group counseling facilitator, and a teacher of communications in the professional counseling school in Florence. Now, we will be going into these topics about defining boundaries and signs that indicate that we may have some difficulty with our boundaries, which if you do, don't be surprised, we all do. And the different types of boundaries that we are, how to notice when, and how to notice that we might have an issue with our boundaries by just being more aware of our emotions. We'll see some case studies and some strategies on how to communicate respectfully, but assertively about these boundaries with I messages and nonviolent communication, which of course is also very much connected to what the last lecture was about. And we'll see things that are this thing called the traffic light framework, the boundaries quadrant, and just have a moment to reflect on your own situation. Okay. So a definition that somewhat satisfied me in these boundaries, that they're like guidelines. So they are rules or limits that we create to identify for ourselves what are reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for other people to behave around us, and how we will respond when someone steps outside those limits. So boundaries are really born out of this mix of our beliefs, our opinions, our attitudes, our needs, past experiences, and they define us also as an individual and outline our likes and dislikes and preferences. And it also sets like the distance or the proximity that we allow others to approach us. Okay, so I would like to play a little game. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing for just a second. Or maybe I shouldn't do that. Yes, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. And I'm going to ask you some questions, okay? So I just ask you to turn off your cameras for a moment. And then I'm going to say some phrases. And if these phrases are true for you, please turn your camera back on. Okay, something phrases that somehow if it sounds like something you might think, or it sounds like something that you've said. All right. So the first one is, why am I the only one who cleans up around here? Why am I the only one who cleans up? Okay. Here we go. Yes. Why? All right. So we've got some people here who have this issue. Thank you very much. You can turn off your screen again. The next one. I usually stop what I'm doing and respond to personal messages immediately because I feel bad if they see that I visualized and didn't answer. So I respond right away. I see it and I respond. Maybe I'm in the middle of doing something, but I feel bad because, you know, especially on WhatsApp, they see that. Okay. All right. Very good. Now I can't see everyone who's turned it on. Let me see. Aha. It's a fairly common one, isn't it? Okay, now you can turn off your screens again. All right, now this one says, when someone talks over me, like in a meeting, or like shoots down an idea or a thought that I've proposed, I shut down. I shut down. And then after, I can't stop thinking and thinking and thinking about what I should have said. Okay. I noticed that Costas is not appearing, so I don't think he has a lot of boundaries. Oh, there he is.
I will never shut up. I will attack.
All right, well, thank you for that. All right, I have one more, okay? I am a hard worker, and so I tend to take over quite a lot of responsibilities in my working groups. But then it bothers me because then the professor gives all of us the same grade. Okay, all right. So I see some of the same faces that pop up. And that's really interesting. Is there a phrase in particular that really jumped out at you? Is there something, I'm gonna go back to sharing, but please feel free to turn on your mics and tell me, like, here, why am I the only one who cleans around here? Or I stop what I'm doing and respond to personal messages. I feel bad when, you know, if they see I've visualized. And then when the group shoots down my thoughts. So tell me, what is that like? Is there anyone in particular that you really relate to? And did you realize that this was a thing?
I can talk about
the last one.
Okay, you go.
See,
Sorry.
see, it just happened. Was that you, Omer? Would you like to share something? Or Tamar, who was it?
It was Tamar.
Oh, okay, Tamar, tell us.
Okay, the cleaning one. I'm a
Mm.
person that's always like, I can't like expect the same standards out of everyone, but I'm a person that if the room I'm in is not neat, then my whole thought process is not neat either. So
Yes, of course.
so I would prefer it to be clean all the time.
Okay.
And I expect that from other people, which I shouldn't.
Should you or shouldn't you? This is the interesting question. Okay. And then there was someone else that wanted to add something. Thank you, Tamar.
No problem.
The last one, the I'm a hard worker. I
Aha, tell me.
sympathize with it a lot because that's why I'm basically I enjoy working alone more than working in a group. So when there's a group, it's hard to set the boundaries of who does what because I just want to do everything to the same status quo, I guess.
Well, because you can trust yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you manage that?
It's hard, but
What have you tried so
somewhere until the due of the assignment, I understand that I can't do it alone. I need the help of the other colleagues, but I usually just do as much as I can alone because I it's hard to give up on my standards of work.
And how do you communicate about this fact that you do things on your own? And then towards the end, you'll pop back up and put it all together with.
Well, usually I cherry pick the people that I work with that are usually fine with it, and I take charge mostly. So my standards are the leading standards, so it won't hamper me as much, and I'll instruct them what I think is the better thing to do. But I won't take over anyone else's work if they think my way is worse than theirs. Then I'll give them their room.
And have you ever had any conflicts about this?
Not lastly, but I assume there could be a lot of conflict around this, especially if someone is like me. If we're the same person, we'll have clashes.
If you have, yes, that's right. That's right. Anyone else? Costas.
So since I'm part of this group, I like to do things by myself. And I'm losing my patience if the people talk too much on what we would like to do. So I'm losing my interest, somehow to the others. If we talk, then I will do it by myself and then I will come back. That's it. This is the result. This is a disadvantage, however, because in the majority of the cases, at the end of the process, and when I have done the thing as I think I have done, I found out that I missed some aspects from the other points of view, from the other people's points of view, because I'm losing my interest. I'm losing the interest to listen to the others if they speak too much and analyze. And I don't like. I like to try, and if I do mistake, I will go back. I will accept and I will move. But I'm not patient in order to wait. And this is a disadvantage in the majority of the case, according to my experience. However, I have a positive feeling as well, because I'm feeling I have done it. So now it's time to correct it.
Yes. Very interesting. And of course, we're talking about, these are kind of like everyday boundaries that are not necessarily life or death in our relationships, but they're small examples of maybe sometimes it's a good place to start in boundaries that are not necessarily so emotionally charged, and thinking about, how can I communicate about this? So let's see. I have this quote here. Stop asking why they keep doing it and start asking why you keep allowing it. How many times do we have situations where someone in our lives is making us crazy because of some behavior of theirs that is just getting on our nerves, and sometimes, or it's something that is it's a little bit uncomfortable or awkward for us to deal with head on. And it's what can happen is we get into, maybe we find other people that we can complain to about it. We might, kind of vent with other people about it. Many of my clients, I have a client right now who talks about when she's a doctor, when she comes back from the hospital, how when she doesn't eat, she can't even walk in the door, that her 6-year-old son and her husband are immediately, her eyes look around the room and she sees maybe dirty clothes on the floor, and then dinner is kind of not really off of the, they haven't really, her husband hasn't cleaned off the table, and both her son and her husband are talking over each other, saying things like, Dad did this, and then Dad saying, but tell your mom the truth and what really happened. And sometimes her son's like physically kind of pulling on her jacket, and she, of course, then says in counseling, how do I make them stop? Right? Or I wish they would understand. And what's very interesting is to think about, okay, we have our 50% in the relationship. And that is what we have influence over, or control over. And instead of hoping that the other people will understand what it is you need, how can we actually communicate about it in a clear way? I want you to think about with this phrase, if there is any aspect of your life other than the scenarios that I mentioned before, but scenarios in your life where you realize that there are just some people that there may be someone that's very close to you who is pushing your buttons about something. And of course you've said, I don't like that, or I would imagine that you've tried to say something, but it keeps happening. So how do you know when a boundary of yours is crossed? The question is, what happens to you? What is it that in your body, in a physical sensation that you get? Maybe it's an emotion that you feel. Maybe it's thoughts that come to your mind. How do you know that someone has entered into that danger zone? This is something, because we all have our different ways. And so Osher says, Costa says, I am doing this to my wife. Okay. And then Osher says, I shrink, feeling small. And so Osher, it's like a sensation of actually like withdrawing. Okay. And Ori and Alan, they feel angry. Costa says she's very accepting, and then I can realize sometimes that she's disappointed, and this makes me feel sad. Yes, absolutely. Because all of our relationships, and the closer we are, the more we are in this dance of trying to understand what these boundaries are and finding a way to kind of negotiate them. Tamara says, I communicate how I feel once, and if it happens again, I cut them off. Okay, thank you, Tamara. This is super, super interesting. Anyone else? How do you know? Do you feel it in your body? Do you have certain thoughts? This is super important. Maya says, I feel nervous and frustrated. And Samia says, sometimes it does not help to communicate that. Tell me more, Samia. And then Tamara says, because I don't like feeling bad and feeling like I'm begging to be treated right. Now let's remember the word begging. Lior says, feeling angry, dismissive, because I was being dismissed, that someone was crossing into my boundary. And so Sammy was saying, because some people only see things their way. And so, okay. And so what she's saying is that it's not there, that it's not something that, but maybe Samuel, what you're saying is sometimes it's best to just ignore it, to not get into the conversation, if I understand correctly. And just, let's say, kind of pretend, yes, not being open to different perspectives. Okay. All right. Interesting. So this is what I think, some information that we really need, okay? There are all kinds of boundaries. And in thinking about the boundaries that you have that are somehow infringed upon, and perhaps you are also infringing upon someone else's boundaries, okay? You might not realize it. You might notice that the person is acting a little weird, or maybe they are acting a little bit withdrawn, or there's a little sarcasm sometimes that comes out in the things they say, and you're like, whoa, what was that? Okay, that's also an indication that something's going on there. So just so you know, these different kinds of boundaries, they could be about time. What could be a time boundary? In what way? Please feel free to tell me what you think.
Can we say that our time boundaries are the deadlines that we have to do things?
Well, I am thinking also, yes, also I'm thinking in terms of, yes, in a relationship. So Costas, for example, you asked for certain information from us by tomorrow at 3 p.m. Okay. And that's possible that it's a sort of a boundary. Okay. That people, if they constantly are like not responding to your deadlines, that's a kind of a boundary. Anyone else have any thoughts about time boundaries?
I think you should know a person for like a certain amount of time before they start to ask for things, or they start to feel comfortable. Some people take time, some people don't. And I think like the people who do request time boundaries are not like crazy for asking for stuff.
Sorry, guys, I'm jumping all over. So yes, that's also, so you're talking about how long you have to know someone. And actually, quite simply, a time boundary is more like, how much time do you have? How much time do you have to spend with someone? How much time do you have to, for example, stay on the phone? What about when, for example, you are attending a lecture and the lecture starts late or goes late or things like that? These are also time boundaries. This is also something that can be very cultural. What is acceptable in one place is not acceptable in another. And sometimes also what, for example, a family member or a friend would expect. Maybe, I mean, I have lots of friends living here in Italy. I mean, lots of people who, adults who speak to family members like, you know, their mother every day. And it's a phone call. It's not just a, you know, a quick message. How's it going? No, it's like several phone calls a day. And this could be a time boundary. Mental. So a mental boundary is about like it's like the freedom to have our own thoughts and our own opinions, our own values. And then there's the emotional boundary. And the emotional boundary is about, for example, how much support is possible for you to give someone. We probably all have had that friend who needs quite a bit of support, and you are very happy to provide it. But then you notice that perhaps it's like a kind of a never-ending need, you know, that Perhaps it's a person who just seems to have a lot of drama in their lives. And so they say things like, oh, I just always feel so much better after talking to you. And then they ask maybe your advice and they ask your opinion. And you're like, I think, but it sounds like you need to do this or that. And then you talk to them again a week later and there's a new crisis. And then you ask about the old one and they are like, and they didn't even really seem to register what it was that you, what suggestions you made, okay? Sometimes it's just a question of the fact that you also have your own emotional bandwidth that, where there's not that much room. Then there's material. I mean, material, it's your stuff. It's your clothes. It's the milk in the fridge. It's money. It's your shoes. Okay, it's, is it okay if, when your roommate says, oh, is it okay if I have my friends come visit and they can also spend, a weekend here and then they spend a week. And so it's sort of like in your space. And then there's internal. And this is a big one. This was one that was mentioned before. Internal is probably the most complicated, because it has to do with our own ability to say no to ourselves, to self-regulate. It's about social media time. It's about when we go to bed. It's about when we open the package of cookies, how many do we eat? Sometimes there's also that, in these internal things. And then there's conversational, about topics that I just don't want to talk about. That's just not something that I really want to spend time sharing. And then there's, of course, physical boundaries, which is one of the first ones that we think of, having to do with touch. Often this gets into, thinking about not just touch, but also, in cases where people feel threatened. All right. But sometimes it's also even just physical touch in the workplace, even having, for example, a colleague who, for some reason, every time you walk by, maybe they have to kind of touch your shoulder, or I don't know, maybe touching your hair, or things in a sort of a gesture that perhaps for that person doesn't really mean anything, but you just feel like it's an invasion. Okay. So there's lots of different ways that we can experience these boundaries. And I was just curious, in thinking back to your own situations, are you realizing that there's a certain kind of boundary of yours that tends to get invaded, or maybe that you invade? Now that you're thinking about it, does it fall into a certain category? What kinds of boundaries are they? Is it more about, like when Tamar was talking about the house cleaning? And is it, in that case, is it sort of like a bit of a physical and like a material thing? And then when you're thinking about, for example, when Samia was talking about how people don't really change their minds about things, right? So is it a bit of a mental boundary and also a conversational one? So the most important thing to realize is that boundaries are on a spectrum. So it's not like there's a right way and a wrong way. These boundaries depend on the time we're living, the resources that we have, and the resources can be internal. So things like emotional, for example, a certain amount of emotional bandwidth, or it might be external, like, I don't know, do you have money if someone is asking you for a loan? Or it might be resources in terms of like how much time you have. And so it depends. And it also depends on who is asking, or who is it that needs something. And so as we go through these next slides, I just want you to think about yourselves. Think about your own experiences as we go through these, okay? So there is such a thing as soft boundaries. And soft boundaries are when it is not a very functional boundary. So on the spectrum of boundaries, it's not very I'm talking about the cases in which it's not very comfortable for you. And a soft boundary is when you feel that that a person is kind of in your what is like in your garden, and it can be very difficult for you to like understand what is bothering me about this. It's hard for you to understand, like, why is this bothering me? What is it that they're doing? I feel bad. I mean, in the end, they're not really asking me for anything big, or, I don't want to say no because, and you have all of your reasons. But what can happen is you really confuse your needs and preferences with those of others. And it can be a big obstacle to developing our own identity. Sometimes this happens in friend groups, it can happen with roommates, it certainly can happen at work, and definitely in families. There are other times, though, where the soft boundary is actually a choice we've made. It's okay, meaning it's a person that we don't, that we feel very comfortable letting them sort of in and out of our garden without any trouble, because there's a lot of trust there. And we'll see more about that as we go on. So then we have something called spongy boundaries, okay, spongy. And a spongy boundary is like a combination of like soft and rigid. We'll see what the rigid ones are. And they don't let in as much. Okay, there's less contagion than the soft boundaries, but sometimes the person is unsure of what to let in, what to keep out. And it's like you notice that something's bothering you, but it's very hard to put your finger on what it is that's creating that discomfort. And so what happens is it's hard to communicate about it, because if we haven't really put our finger on it, we might say things like, I would, people talk about it's not polite, or they might say, I want to be treated fairly, which it's not that there's nothing wrong with wanting those things. It's just that it's not a very clear communication, because what is polite for you might be something a bit different for someone else. So it's actually the first thing that before we deal with anyone else, and Tamar was talking about the fact that she will tell them once, and if they do it again, they're out. Okay, so that brings us to the rigid boundary, rigid, not necessarily firm. Here I'm talking about something different, rigid, okay? So some people go walk around through life with a very rigid boundary in general. And some people instead, in certain circumstances, in certain moments of their life, with certain people, they need to have a rigid boundary, okay? So, but a person who kind of has this way in life is a person that is often closed off or walled off. And so it's very hard to get close physically or emotionally. But as I said, they can be selective, because it depends on the circumstances. Perhaps it's regarding a negative or a harmful experience that you've had. And so you need to have an absolute rigid boundary, okay? And this is something, what can happen is that they close off rather than try to be in that kind of what can seem like a messy situation of trying to actually communicate about it, because we are not really taught how to communicate about this. And then there's flexible. Okay, so it's similar to spongy, but the flexible person feels that they have more control over what's going on, because they have a bit clearer what is okay with them, what is not okay with them, what they need and what they don't need, and they can decide and they can communicate about that in a much more effective way, but not in a way that closes the other one out. So they decide what to let in, what to keep out. They're resistant to what they call emotional contagion, meaning they don't get sucked into as much of the I feel bad, I feel guilty, but what if they then, you know, exclude me, or what if I seem antisocial, or all of those things, okay? They're a bit more resistant to this kind of thing, and they don't feel like they're being taken advantage of. And they feel generally at ease in relationships. When they notice the discomfort, just like what you were talking about in the text, in the chat, right? Where you were saying, I get angry, I feel a bit resentful, or I feel small, I shrink. These, let's say, manifestations are your friend, because noticing what happens to you is a sort of communication. It's information. It's precious information, because when you have, especially that emotional and physical information, then you can think about what's going on with you. And you can then think about, what are my feelings and what are my needs? And then be able to formulate a request. So there are some signs of boundary issues, okay? Let's look at these, and then you can write in the chat the numbers that you think apply to you. So we'll go through them, and then once you've seen all 9 of them, I ask that you please write in the chat which numbers really seem to speak to you, okay? Difficulty making decisions, meaning that for every decision you are absolutely in angst and you have to consult everybody. You've got to ask your mom, your dad, your brother, your best friend, your roommate. You know, you talk about it, and everybody has an opinion. And you are constantly in the contagion of other people's opinions. And sometimes you think you're going to make a decision based on the last person you spoke to. This happens. And then there are people who feel selfish for saying no. That's where the guilt comes in. But I feel bad. Okay? Boundaries are selfish. Frequent apologizing. So when there's a lot of over explaining and justifying why we're putting a boundary, because it's not just enough to say, no, I won't be able to do that. It's because, you know, because if I start doing this, and then it's a problem because I'm also trying to finish this other thing. And, you know, I have other things going on as well. And, you know, my grandfather was in the hospital and all of these things, okay? And then I'll let someone else in. Uncertainty about how much and what to share. So some people have difficulty understanding what, like in certain circumstances, in certain contexts, how much we can be open, how many parts of our lives we can share. And some people don't, let's say, they're not sure how much to reciprocate. Then we have passive aggressiveness. So meaning, when someone crosses a boundary of yours, is it that instead of really just saying, okay, I noticed this, this is what I feel, and this is what I need, and so I'm asking you. Instead, maybe there's a little sarcasm, or maybe there is a bit of stonewalling, you know, where, you know, the old, what's wrong? Nothing. No, something's wrong. No, I'm fine. Okay, this stuff. Or maybe you're just acting a little cold, and of course you're thinking, well, you know, I'm sure that they'll get the hint. Okay, this is passive aggressive communication. Sometimes we sabotage what someone is doing, you know, because we are a little offended. Maybe we have a need for external validation. So there's a bit of people pleasing, you know, I don't really want to do this, but I'm afraid that they'll think. I don't want anyone to think. I don't want them to judge me for. And so you don't even hear what your need is. You're trying to please others. And then the big one is feeling resentment. Resentment is like you are feeling like you are like the giver or compromising a lot. You're always the one that's compromising. And that relationships are absolutely exhausting. Or the relationships that are close to you are exhausting. Okay, I call them the energy vampires. Okay, the energy vampires, and that you really just want to go home and lay in your bed and watch Netflix because it's just too much work. And if you are also a person that has a lot of drama in your relationships, okay, so that there's a lot of volatility or people who bring a lot of their drama into your life and you're trying to fix it, okay? So let me know in the chat, which ones seem to speak to you? Okay, Costas is feeling 7, Emily is feeling 2. Yes. Door 3 and 5. The frequent apologizing. Alex, 1 and 3. Okay, Tatiana, thank you for being here. This is super interesting. Camila has 5, a bit of passive aggressiveness. Maya has 1, 2, and 3. Inbal has 3 and 7. Yeah, this is so interesting, isn't it? Yes. Samia has a little bit of uncertainty. So does Tamar. Mikhail has uncertainty and some passive aggressive behavior. So first of all, congratulations. Juliet has a little bit of feeling selfish and then a little bit of feeling resentment. So the fact that you are able to identify this, and of course, Samia, it depends on the relationship. It depends on the situation. And let's be honest, it depends on how we are. Because if we're in a moment where we're getting enough sleep, where things are going pretty well at work and in our home, everything is, you know, fairly okay, we have more to give. Or if it's a person where we have history with them, we trust them, you know, they can wander in and out of our garden, you know, our you know, the metaphorical garden and kind of take what they need, it's different. So you being aware of this is a huge step because you will notice what's happening to you. Okay, thank you, Omer, and thank you, Ori and Alan. So this is, have you ever seen one of these emotion wheels? Is this something you've ever seen? Isn't that pretty? So beautiful, isn't it? And this is such a useful tool for us, okay? In understanding in our emotional intelligence and social intelligence, because here we can think about what kinds of reactions we have when someone has crossed a boundary, certain kinds of boundaries, and depending on the context. And we need vocabulary. We need emotional vocabulary. In the middle of this emotion wheel, we see what they call kind of like the primary emotions. You probably have all seen the film Inside Out. Yeah, you saw Inside Out. Okay, so these are a lot of the primary emotions. It does not have disgust here, okay, but that's obviously also considered a primary emotion. But it's like love, joy, surprise, sadness, anger, fear. And then it gives us all of the nuance of these emotions, right? So fear, is it horror? Is it that I'm nervous in the English sense, not in like the Latin sense, because nervous in other cultures means angry. And nervous in English means like that my heart is beating and I'm sweating and like kind of how I felt before I logged on today when I had to do this presentation. So or things like sadness, right? Is it disappointment? Do I feel ashamed? Do I feel depressed? Am I full of regret, guilty? Okay. Knowing, having the words to describe it is power. And here's another quote that I want you to think about by Paulo Coelho. When you say yes to others, make sure that you are not saying no to yourself. What does that mean? Please unmute yourselves. What do you think he's talking about? What would be an example of when we would say yes to others, but we're saying no to ourselves?
It's like to do things that we enjoy and we like, and like to be at the same time to be good companions, at the same time to respect our, how can I say, selections and what we would like to do, to be satisfied inside and outside. This is what I'm getting,
Okay, good point. Does anyone have an example of when you said yes to others and then you realized though that you were kind of saying no to yourself?
If they say to you to do things and you like to do things, at the same time you don't consider that you need to have a free time or to go to exercise, this is something that you are going to apply this expression continuously. You need to place the boundaries. What did you say? The balance between life and work. Job, how do they call it? I think this is an example that comes to my mind right now.
The work-life balance.
Correct.
Absolutely, saying yes to another collaboration, even though you are stretched to the limit, but you feel bad. And they asked you because you are so good at this.
You're not feeling bad. Susan, let me say, you are not feeling bad to say no, but sometimes you like something so much that it works against you.
Okay, so that's
It's
more of an
like
internal.
It's like a passion. It's like, how can I say, like a bad example to provide is a drug addict. The bad example. This is a bad example. But obviously what they are doing, for this moment, probably at the beginning they like it, but they know that they're going to harm them. I'm not talking about the same thing.
Yes, I mean, that's, yes, that would be a
yes.
bit of an extreme thing.
Yes,
This is
yes.
more, I'm wondering if anyone has an example of
I
when,
think when you start like a new job and they ask something of you, but you have other plans, but you're just really new to this job,
for
so you
example,
can't say no.
what would be too much for you?
Not too much. It's like I have something to do tomorrow with my friend, and someone at work asks me, like my boss asks me to fill in for someone else, and I can't say no because I'm new in this job, but at the same time I have plans with my friends, so.
Okay, yes. And what about something where you are, let's say it's more in your personal relationships? Does anyone have an example? For example, when people kind of like what we talked about before, when you have that friend that needs a lot of emotional support, okay, and you feel useful, you actually, and of course your friend also thanks you and tells you, oh, the way you listen is just, I always feel so much lighter and so much better. But the problem is that time that you gave, you actually needed for something else, and it was a little hard for you to put a bit of a limit on it. Because also, that it was something that, made her feel better, but it's like then you are feeling a little stressed after, because now you're like, I wasn't expecting to do that, okay? Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up. Is that an example that makes sense? Okay. Oh, yes, Costas, did you want to raise your hand or give me a thumbs up?
Wrong button. Wrong button.
Okay, okay. And so I'll give you a couple of case studies, okay? So we've got Anna. Anna, I'm just totally inventing these people, all right? But I was thinking about here we're talking about soft skills, and we have an eye on your soft skills as professionals. So that we're gonna have a part of this that's a bit more focused on the professional part of you, and then the part that's a bit more about the personal part of you. Because our personal lives come into work. Our moods, our frustrations, our ups and downs come with us. And the ups and downs and the moods and the frustrations from work come home with us. So it's in this whole conversation about boundaries, it's something that is transversal. So we've got Anna here, okay? And Anna notices that when she speaks during meetings, she's often interrupted or talked over by her colleagues. Okay, they've got a bad habit about this. She's convinced it's because she's young, and she starts feeling resentful. So what does she do? She confides in another young coworker, and they start kind of bonding over this issue, okay? It becomes like, that's their thing. When they see each other, they're full of like little stories about the ways that they feel a bit maybe disrespected when they're being talked over, and okay. And Anna's mood at home is affected. And she sometimes kind of lashes out at her partner suddenly over small misunderstandings. What's going on here with Anna? What is Anna's problem? If you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself, and don't worry, like it's not really a right answer or wrong answer, but what do you notice? Like, what does Anna's problem seem to be? In the very beginning. Nobody? Is it not very clear?
Yeah, can you repeat the question?
Sure,
clearly?
sure. So my question is, in looking at Anna's, like what happens to her at work, and then how she is manifesting her discomfort with this, okay? She's confiding in another coworker. They complain a lot together. They're kind of bonding over this, okay? And they're kind of looking for the situations where they can share it with each other about, can you believe what they did, okay? And then she goes home and she's also pretty grouchy. And so if we go to the very beginning of the story, what is Anna's original problem? It's written right here. What is it that is the start of this, I would say, irritation and resentment of Anna?
She can't like put her boundary and make the people around her stop and listen to her, like stop interrupting her.
Exactly.
She doesn't have a place, like or at least she makes it out that she doesn't have a place because she doesn't set a boundary. She makes the situation by not being active and setting the boundary.
Okay, and so that's a consequence. And like, if we're just to look at what her original problem is, her original problem is,
I think
She
I
feels
think
disrespected. Sorry.
yeah?
I think that her original problem is that she's not expressing this boundary. She's not saying to the other, stop it, up to here, stop to the interact me. Let me finish. I think it's different to feel something, and it's different to express this feeling. I think her problem is that she's not expressing something she's feeling very much, and that's why she's reacting then back home inappropriate, disappropriate.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that even before that, her problem is that she doesn't, that she is not able, or she is interrupted. And this being interrupted makes her feel probably unimportant. Or makes her feel like, you were saying, like she doesn't have a place. Or makes her
Disrespected.
disrespected, or even maybe inadequate, okay? There can be lots of emotions, and actually only Anna knows what the real emotion is. What we are seeing is the consequence of her not really being in touch with it and handling it. What does she do then to try to relieve some of this stress?
She puts it on someone else.
Okay. And what else does she do, which is very, very, very common?
She
She's looking
validates.
for conformity from another person that suffers the same fate.
Okay, and does this happen in real life?
Yeah, sure.
A lot, a
We're
lot.
stronger in groups.
Well, then what happens is that complaining is a kind of relief. Okay, and it's a way to bond. But the problem with complaining is it becomes a negative bond. As long as we stay in the complaining, we're together. But the moment I take a step towards, for example, communicating more effectively, or actually trying to, let's say, express my needs and also understand the other points of person's point of view, I'm sort of, I'm kind of like abandoning my friend. This is a big problem in the workplace. People feel a lot of comfort in finding their complaint buddy. And then it becomes,
Susan,
yeah.
may I add something? I think there's another issue here. In addition to what you said, it's the issue of turn taking when you're talking to somebody else. So some people would not wait for their turn. They would just interrupt and say whatever they want, but others will wait for their turn. And I face this problem like many times when I work with different cultures. So sometimes it depends on the culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And how is it for you when you're waiting your turn? And your
I
turn,
wait for my turn. I haven't done that with you now because I interrupted you. But normally I would wait for my turn then that another person stops talking, and I will ask for permission to share my thoughts. I never invade a conversation.
very interesting too, because it's sort of like, there's no right way or wrong way, and especially on Zoom, it's very difficult because the moment one person starts speaking, it like, if two people start speaking at the same time, then we can't hear anything, you know? In person, people can just have side conversations going, they can interrupt, they can talk over it, they can make a joke about it, then everybody's laughing, and then it's taken away. This is something that can be very frustrating in a work environment. And so Anna's having difficulty. So let's see. Then we've got Michael, okay? Michael tends to be an organized and reliable team member. He is a perfectionist with a great sense of duty. He is a highly valued member of the team. His colleagues depend on him more and more to resolve issues because he's just very good at it, right? He has a lot of skills. He's very good at organizing workflow, finishing tasks sometimes when they're just a little behind. And he feels increasing anxiety over this responsibility and resentment towards his colleagues. And he's thinking about leaving the company to find a better work-life balance. What is going on here? Yes, Dor.
I think that Michael is thinking about that he's a giver. He give every time to the company, and it's making him feel very anxious and have a lot of pressure because of it. So I think this is the problem that he's facing.
Yes. Yes. And in the end, what kind of choice is he about to make?
I think that he chose the very passive path. He could talk to his team and say to them like, hey, I'm giving too much of myself, but he rather quit his job and move to another job instead.
Exactly. Because what kind of magic thinking does he have going right now?
I mean, he's a people pleaser, it seems like. He has a sense of duty, so he feels like if you gripe to them, it will basically out him as being not a team player. So he
Mhm.
says, I will not disappoint the team or try and confront them and just leave or find another team.
I will just leave.
Mhm.
Okay? Because what do you think Michael is dreaming will happen?
He'll find another place and
Ah,
start
he'll
from
find
scratch.
He'll find another place that will just magically
Mhm.
understand.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, this happens. This happens, that people then will, it's like, it's very difficult to realize that they have their 50% in this. Then we've got Kirsten. And Kirsten, she feels very welcome in her new job. Her team values cooperation, and they organize a lot of social events outside of the office. It's like as a sort of team building thing. But and so she gets invited to dinners and drinks and weekend excursions. It's a small firm, and everybody's friends, right? And at first she's thrilled. But over time, she notices that she's kind of tired, and it's not just physically, but it's also kind of emotionally. And some of the personal spills over into the workday, like different conversations that they had, or, I don't know, relationships. And it makes it hard to stay focused. And it also makes it very difficult for her to handle constructive feedback from her colleagues / friends. And she's also had to quietly fix some distraction mistakes. She feels a little bit of mental fog about this. And she wonders if she's just not cut out for this job. Yeah, Dor. What's going on here?
I think that Kirsten is suffering from relationship fatigue,
Yes.
and a little bit, yeah.
Yes. And
And
she definitely is. And what's happening to her?
it,
What kind of emotion?
it's making her feel a little bit like this job or this relationship in the current job is not cut out for her. Like she want to find another place, but like before, it's not gonna magically change.
Well, she's feeling very insecure also about her capabilities, right? Whereas Michael, I don't think he feels insecure about his capabilities, but he feels like maybe he's being used. And in this case, Kirsten seems to feel more like, I don't know, like she's got some imposter syndrome maybe, and like she's not, and then, she really, it's a lot of relationships, and it's very hard. It sounds like it's hard for her to decide what level, what register the relationships are on, because it's so mixed in with also social activities, sharing, friendships, that then when they need to actually get down to work and maybe even, I don't know, give her some feedback, like she's feeling very defensive, or not defensive, but she's feeling,
It's
um,
personal.
I'm sorry?
That it's personal. Like it's about her and not about her job.
Yes.
So she's not good enough for this job. Actually, it
Yes.
reinforces the thinking of she's the imposter syndrome.
Exactly, exactly. And then we've got Mark. Okay. Mark, his team leader, Diana, she tends to work in the evenings, on the weekends, all right? She's the classic workaholic, all right? She sends emails on Friday afternoons, requesting actions for Monday morning. she I don't think she's an unpleasant person, but I mean, she just works all the time. And she also uses like chat messaging after work. So, oh, just a quick question. So she's not rude about it, but it's kind of like just a quick question, He was okay with it because he really does love the work. But then when Mark's baby was born, Mark hinted, that, I'm not gonna be as available. And Diana, avoided sending messages on the weekend, but now that the baby is a few months old, she started again. And he just loses it. Just one Saturday afternoon and the baby's sleeping on his chest. And he's finally he's thinking of all the things he has to do, but the baby finally fell asleep and he doesn't want to move. And then he gets this message, say something, and he just feels the heat of the anger just shoot through his body. And he puts her on silent mode and he fires off a complaint to human resources, demanding that they step in.
I think in this case, because he did not intervene earlier, he overreacted. He let the thing to go to the end, and his reaction, however correct he is wrong, from political point. How can I say? From political point of view,
Oh,
he
yeah,
went from one end to the other.
Exactly. Because what happened was an emotional overreaction, right? That led to an action that, yes, he probably then will be thinking when he goes to bed that, he'll wake up at 2 a.m. and be like, maybe it was too much. But this happens with boundaries. When boundaries are not clear, we can go and go and go, and we keep kind of swallowing, okay, all right, okay, whatever. And then there's an expression in Italian that says, there's nothing worse than a nice person when they get mad. Meaning, because when they finally get mad, there's a big explosion. Yes, Omer.
Yeah, so like Costa said that because he didn't reinforce the boundary before, he overreacted after. But like I don't know if it's always possible to reinforce a boundary that wasn't exist in the first place. Like after a while it becomes very almost impossible to make the boundary exist.
Interesting thought.
I think in this case, Omer, you need to be the boundaries. They don't appear because you do not appear, but you can very politely set the boundaries from the first negative feeling, because in this situation, it has happened to me a lot of times. I was working in the best groups. I let the people. I was doing everything. Everything. This has happened to me more than 5 times in my life. I let the people. I was doing, and then I was building. I was discussing with myself. Now he's exploiting me. He's exploiting. And then one day I went and I said, I'm leaving. And then the people, no, this has happened 5 times in my life. And then the people, they are asking what happened to him. I mean, they cannot realize, you don't let the others to realize what has happened to you. And at the end, even though that probably you are right, you are not right for the others, because they say, like, this guy is strange. He's very, very well, and suddenly he moves away. He does not provide any devotion.
Yeah.
Did you understand? So it is my mistake that, and this guy's, Mark's mistake, that he did not say politely or discuss and communicate. That's why communication is very important.
Yes, and that's right.
To set up the very early, very polite. You don't need to live a self nightmare with yourself and discuss with you. No. And others, oh no. No.
And you know what?
And
the
then
thing
boom.
Cause if I can interrupt, is that noticing that you're having the conversation in your head is information. It's good. That means that you're starting to realize something's going on with me. Samia, tell me, what did you want to say?
I wanted to say that this is very common with some students who work during the week from Sunday, like in Israel, from Sunday to Thursday. And then when they sit to do their assignments and tasks, they start sending me, and I'm a teacher, so they start sending me emails on the weekend, over the weekend. And I don't respond. So they send me an email on Friday morning, and then after 2 hours, and then after 3 hours, and then on Saturday morning and Saturday evening. And on Sunday, when I come back to work and I start responding, they would say, you don't relate to the emails we send to you. And some of the students don't get it, that like there are some boundaries, like we don't work on Friday and Saturday. So
Yes,
it's very common. I
yes, it's
faced
very
this
common.
problem many times with the students.
Yes. And it's interesting too, because sometimes the students experience it even with the teachers. You know, like that it's whatever that, or with the professors, that they'll tell them at the last minute about something, or, and it's very and in your case that you're talking about, the specific case, it's that it's like maybe you set the boundary because maybe you put the email with the automatic response, you know, saying that I am out of the office until Sunday morning at 9 a.m. But people push on the boundary because they need to be reminded of it early and often. Now, yeah, can you relate? Have you, you know, we've already talked about this, you know, what kinds of reactions do they have and how self-aware are they? Let's see if someone else, let's see. Yes, thank you for being here. And so we're talking about being assertive, okay? And in this idea of being assertive, okay, wait, I skipped over a couple things by accident. We were talking about this before with these communication styles. We had talked about how someone was being a bit passive, Michael was being a bit passive, and then, you know, Anna was being a bit passive aggressive. Then of course we sometimes have people who are just aggressive, like in Mark's case. And so the idea is to practice and to get comfortable with this idea of what is assertive communication, where in assertive communication, it's like I am aware of what happens to me, meaning that physical sensation that I get, the feelings that I have, the explosion of thoughts that I have, and I can talk about that while still being open to the relationship. Because we talked before about how some people say, you know, I tell them once, and if they do it again, they're out. But that can be very complicated in life. Very complicated. Sometimes we lose out on what could be great relationships, but it's that we feel threatened by, you know, them not respecting this boundary, and we make a big judgment about them. So the idea is being respectful of ourselves and curious about the others. Not so easy. Obviously, there's lots of benefits, right? That, you know, making sure that you are heard and treated fairly, and it enhances our communication skills. It is such a great skill to have. People feel very comfortable in your presence when you are an assertive communicator, because they always know who they're dealing with. There is a certain transparency and, let's say, directness, without getting all mixed into guilt and, you know, manipulation, and okay, it's very clear. So it will definitely help you feel better equipped to face conflict. So a big thing that I encourage you to learn more about is nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg. It's a simple method. It's simple when you see what it is. It's hard to do, very hard. But are any of you familiar with nonviolent communication? Give me a thumbs up if you have. No? Okay. It is it's a very clear empathic communication, and it consists of 4 steps. State the observations without judgment, okay? It's I observe this. My client, remember the doctor that I was telling you about, who would come in the house and her husband and her 6-year-old were already, pulling on her and kind of talking over each other? Okay, when I asked her, so what do you observe when you walk in the door? And she says, I see a total disaster. I said, total disaster is a judgment. Use your scientific part to tell me, what do you actually see? And she said, well, I see clothes on the floor, I see dishes on the table, I see crumbs on the floor, and I see toys that are out. That is how we state what we observe. By saying a total disaster, we are already dumping something on the other person, and they will be less likely to listen because they start getting defensive. They start then having a counter argument with you. And then you state the feeling that the observation is triggering in you using an I message. When I walk in the door and I see the dishes on the table and the toys on the floor and the clothes on the floor, I feel overwhelmed. Because if she says, you make me feel disrespected, she is going into their garden and basically saying, you are disrespectful. And this is a you message. And the you message will undoubtedly generate defensiveness, taking it personally. Having to say, because then it becomes an argument about, I'm not being disrespectful, you're being disrespectful, but And so by saying, I feel overwhelmed, she is staying in her 50%. And then state the need that underlies the feeling and the need that is not yet satisfied. So the need in her case was, and it took her a while to find it. We spent probably 20 minutes in our session talking about this. But her need was to have some type of a cushion, like an emotional and a time cushion between her work time and her going into what she called the trenches of her home life. Okay. And we talked about what she could do for herself to get this cushion. And so the 2 things that she said she was going to try to do, one was an internal boundary where she was going to get in the car after work and she was not going to make work phone calls while she was driving. She was going to, I asked her, what do you need at that moment? She said, I need, either if I'm going to make a phone call, it's going to be to a friend where we're going to talk about, silly things, or I need to listen to music. And we talked about how she needs to then have the playlist ready. She needs to have it without any friction. You know what I mean? You need to be able to satisfy that need. And then she talked about the boundary that she needs with her 6-year-old and her husband to establish with them, not in the moment she walks in the door, in a quiet moment, to say, when I walk in the house and I see the dishes on the table and the clothes on the floor, I feel overwhelmed. And so, and when actually I need a moment to get to kind of decompress and then be ready to hear about your day, to share things, to problem solve. And so then she had to make a concrete request for action. And it wasn't easy for her, but she finally said, and so I'm going to ask that when I come in the door, we say hello, give a hug. I'm going to go right into the bathroom, take a shower, and in 10 minutes, I will be out. And then I'm all yours. Instead, this was such a, when she first came in the door, it was, they are driving me crazy. And what happens is she gets angry and everyone is unhappy. Everyone, no one's needs are satisfied, okay? But if we speak very clearly about this, and of course, her 6-year-old, we cannot say to a 6-year-old, I need the evening for myself, right? He's been waiting for his mom. So this is where we negotiate the boundary. What is possible for a 6-year-old, okay? What is possible for a 16-year-old is going to be different. Just like Samia said that it depends on the context. There's also a traffic light framework, if for all of you who really appreciate more like cognitive tools. And you can think of these boundaries like a traffic light. And the green light is after you have gone through those 4 steps that Rosenberg gives us in nonviolent communication. Then we're thinking about, okay, someone crosses that boundary because they will. The 6-year-old will forget. Her husband will forget. Her coworkers will call her while she's on her way home because it's not their priority. It's not necessarily because they're bad people. It's because they're trying to satisfy a different need. So sometimes people need a gentle reminder because people will push on the boundary to see if it's for real. So a gentle reminder. If it continues, then we proceed to the yellow light and it crosses after the green level. We deliver a firmer reminder and we might also mention what consequences there could be if this boundary is not respected. We can also request and offer solutions that are okay with you, meaning obviously this person is trying to satisfy a different need, and so your boundaries are clashing. And then we've got the red light, and the red light is more stringent, okay? It's when the other levels have failed and we need to take decisive action to protect ourselves, okay? This is when we are really in a threatening situation. That's when, you know, when you would go to HR and file a complaint. You would go to the police, for example, if you were being harassed, or if you had to go no contact with someone and say to them, I am no longer available, and you are not available. You do not answer, you don't answer messages, and you don't, I mean, sometimes we have to go to the red light. But what I want you to think about is, are you sometimes going from the nonviolent steps, and then the moment that doesn't happen, are you going to the red light? Like in Mark's case, Mark didn't even make a proper request, did he? The one with the baby. And so some possibilities of how, for example, Anna and Michael and Mark could have dealt with this. This is just a beginning, okay? There could be many ideas, but perhaps Anna could define the situation by saying, during meetings, I notice that the person speaking is often interrupted. I myself have experienced this. Defining the situation. There's no judgment. There is no passive aggressive. It is a very scientific look. Michael could say, I have taken on extra tasks to facilitate overall workflow from the team. This is taking time from my primary responsibilities. So he's not blaming anyone. He is not, you know, kind of complaining about it to somebody, and you know, this is the fact. Mark, I am dedicated to my work and I am stimulated by the motivating environment. At the same time, I am adapting to parenthood, which takes time and energy. The facts. The facts. Kirsten, I enjoy both the kind of work and the friendly environment. My work requires great attention to detail and constant problem solving. Okay, so they are framing the problem. What do you think? Now, I'm going to just continue with Anna, but then I'm going to ask you guys to think about the other ones, okay? So Anna might say then, moving on, making in the second part of the communication, our time is a precious resource, and frequent interruptions and digressions during meetings make communication less effective. I then spend time responding to follow-up emails that ask for clarification of issues that could be dealt with in our meeting. So she's not blaming anyone. She is not calling anyone out. She's not embarrassing anyone. And she is staying in these professional boundaries. And then she says what she needs. When I have the floor, I need to speak without interruption while being aware of time constraints. Because it's not like Anna wants to talk for an hour, but she's saying, I'm conscious of time constraints, but when I have the floor, I need to speak. And then perhaps she can then make that request. I would like for us to agree on a system that would let the speaker know that others have something to say without interrupting. Now, I know we should have learned this in kindergarten, but some of us didn't. Or some of us, we knew it in kindergarten, but as we kind of grew professionally or as these other parts come out, and sometimes it seems ridiculous, but we need to say this. And then I jumped. Sorry, guys. And then she makes a request and she also sets the consequences. She says, in my case, if I am interrupted moving forward, I will remind that person of the signal that we have agreed upon, and I will finish my thoughts. Collaborating effectively is important to me. My hope is that this small change can have a big impact on the quality of our teamwork. Now, if you had a colleague who spoke like that, what would you think? What kind of impression does this person give? Let me know what you think. Turn on your mic. I'm curious.
I like that.
What do you like about it, Samia?
The person is stating exactly what she feels, and she's making her request clear, defining it, explaining it, and describing the consequences of it.
Yes.
And in a very polite, gentle, and convincing way.
Okay.
In my case, no, I have an opposite feeling than Samia. I think that is, I mean, it's very, how can I say, loser response.
Tell me
Oh,
more.
really? Mm.
Because she says like, if you're going to do it, I will stop. I mean, she depends on the reaction of the other one. I mean, I like the reactions before, the other type of reactions that you have, earlier. If, I got the well, you are providing various kind of responses, no, of the same issue. So the last one, I found it not lose, some kind of loser,
Like weakness?
weakness, like I depend on you, and if you're going to do it, I will stop. I mean,
Well, wait. Where does she say that she will stop? She's saying that if I'm interrupted, I
no,
will
look, I will remind that the person of the signal we have agreed,
and I will finish my thoughts. Meaning, if someone's interrupting her, she will go, we agreed on raising hands.
and I will finish my thought.
Yes.
What does it mean? I will finish my thoughts.
Meaning I'm sorry.
Continue talking.
That she will continue talking.
I mean, I got it that I will finish. I will stop. To
No.
speak.
No, you're right.
Okay, all right.
I
So
totally understand.
I agree. I agree. I was wrong, and I agree with Samia. Yes, this is something very clear. It is something very clear that I'm going to expose you if you're going to do it politely. That I will make a signal somehow.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
remind me
I got it
No.
because the word finish for me, it's like I will stop. It's like, yeah. So I was wrong before. Yeah, I mean,
I thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Very important. And what about any of the students? Any thoughts about this? If you, Does this seem like from another universe? You know, like this is a Hollywood script? Impractical? I could never say this. What do you think?
We can see that it's important to her. And if she wrote this kind of thing, so maybe we should treat her more respectfully and take her words.
Mm-hmm. And does she just make it about herself?
No, of course not. She's talking about effective communication with everyone.
And why does that, how can that be helpful in getting her needs satisfied? If it was just, I need this, and when I talk, I want the opportunity to finish and don't want to be interrupted. What could happen?
She controls the situation, no? She controls, she has fully control of, her time. She controls her boundaries in this way.
But will people be more inclined to collaborate with her?
No,
If she makes it into how we can benefit from this, or if it's how I can benefit.
I think this is a common sense. I mean, for the rest of it, it has to do with the maturity of the rest of the team or the people that they are there. If you don't interact, of course, all of us, we are going to get to the point faster, and we are going to respect each other, and we are going to work better. It's like to work without friction. I mean,
Right.
it depends, on the maturity of the others as well.
Yes, and it also depends on, like, Anna also is being she's using a lot of social intelligence, because she's also recognizing that she needs her colleagues to have a little buy-in. This is a pattern of theirs. They're very comfortable with this, interrupting each other, talking over each other. Why should they want to change? And she is not just making it then about her need, but saying, this is something that can help our collaboration. This is an important piece of making sure that we get people on board. So we don't have too much time, so I'm going to maybe leave that for the assignment. But like, what about in our personal lives? This requires a lot of self-awareness. And I think that this is an excellent quadrant in helping us understand a bit more about these boundary combinations. So look at this. We've got on one corner, soft boundaries, and then on the other corner, hard. But next to soft, we can also have loving, or we can also have soft as in resistant. And then we can have hard and loving and hard and resistant. Okay, now I know everybody's hungry, but I'm gonna ask for another little bit of, I would love to put you in breakout rooms for a few minutes, but we only have a few more minutes. So the interaction has to take place this way, okay? So think about it. What might be, for example, a hard yet loving boundary in our personal lives? What could that be? Is that like, does that seem like an oxymoron, like hard but loving? How about when you were a teenager, did your parents have any boundaries for you? Rules? And what kind, and that you hated?
I had to go every day when I was in the high school at 9:30 to go to sleep.
Okay.
This is like they were doing because I should be rest, but it was hard for me.
I was, for me, it was 10 o'clock, Costas, so
I
high
don't
five.
remember. I just remember the 9:30.
Oh, I can, yes. Okay, that is a perfect example of a hard but loving boundary, especially if it was done in it wasn't, a big screaming fight every night, but where it was like, this is a hard boundary, but it's because it.
Another one that can come to my mind about hard and loving is like when I was an athlete, I had to sleep and take care of myself, do not go out, to the bar if I have the games, I should, a little bit isolated from the rest of my friends that they were not involving in what I was doing as not as a hobby, but as a profession. It was like hard and loving. I liked it, what I was doing, but it was hard because I was not with my friends all the time.
Excellent example, because that, remember, is an internal boundary. You had to do this for yourself. And you had to self-regulate. Excellent. Does anyone have an idea of what, for example, this is an interesting one, like hard and, I'm sorry, soft, yet resistant. This is a problematic one. It's one of the ones that gets us into trouble. It's a bit like when we talked about soft and spongy. When we talked about, for example, one of you used examples of, I don't know, like a big one, for example, going back to my doctor client, okay, where hers were kind of soft and resistant because when she walked through the door, she didn't realize that she, could actually have a request about a boundary. So she was just, they were invading. She was letting them invade and was at first kind of trying to make some sense of it, but she was angry and resentful. And what would happen was then she would lose her temper, maybe 15 minutes later, about something that was totally unrelated, but because she was up to here. And so the soft means that then there comes this consequence of resistance. So it might be avoiding people, withdrawing, being passive aggressive, but you allowed them to trample this boundary. And so this is my favorite metaphor. And I want you all to think about this for the assignment that you will have. Just think of these boundaries as a garden. And when I say this, imagine this is your garden, the garden of your life. And in this garden, you are looking out and you have chosen those flowers and those bushes and that tree and maybe the barbecue and the table, and you have things in your garden. And your garden represents, it has a gate around it, not a wall, a gate, and you can look over into other people's gardens. And your gate it can open and it can close, okay? My client she said she doesn't even realize that her gate can close. She says for her, everyone can just come in and out and they do what they want and they move the flowers and they dig up the shrubs and they, drag the chairs out of it and they use them in their garden and they're barbecuing things on her barbecue. And she feels invaded and frustrated and resentful, but she keeps then thinking, but I feel bad to say something. So I hope that this is you can understand what's going on. And the closer the person is to her, the harder it is for her to do this. Because it's all mixed in with this idea of if I love someone, then I should give. And instead, you know what you give? You present the bill. You present the bill with your impatience, with your overreactions, with your coldness, with your withdrawal, with your silent treatment, with your sabotage. So in the garden is what I can do, what I know how to do. This is good for work. What is okay with me, what is possible for me, what I need. And then beyond the gate, we have, what is outside of it? And the outside and beyond our gate is what I cannot do, or what I do not know how to do. This happens a lot in work. What is not okay with me? What is not possible at this time in these circumstances? And your garden can get bigger and contain more plants and flowers depending on the moment you're living and the resources that you have. And that is the beauty of it. But only you can know what is in your garden. And only you know if a person needs to knock, or if you can keep the gate cracked open, or if that person has total access to your garden because you know they will treat it in the way that you need it to be treated. And guess what? The same thing applies to you in other people's gardens. Because that same client of mine who had difficulty with the boundaries of, putting those boundaries with her child and her husband, guess what? She invades their gardens too. Does the same thing. And so there are people who invade your garden by being aggressive or needing more than you can give or wanting to, let's say, help you. But when we enforce those boundaries, others might feel confused and even unhappy. But how do you learn to lead them towards the gate, respecting both you and others? I thought this was an interesting quote to end with. When we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable, we feel used and mistreated. And Costas gave us an example of that. And this is why we sometimes attack who they are, which is far more hurtful than addressing a behavior. So, what are your thoughts? I would love for you to either unmute yourselves or to write in the chat box, giving yourself a moment to reflect, okay? Like about what it is you are thinking about. What are you leaving? Something that you will leave here for? Would you like to leave something in this moment we've had together, either as a gift to the group or as something that's a burden for you that you want to throw in the trash? Okay, so the leaving could be both ways. It could be something you don't want anymore and you're leaving it. Or it could be a gift that you want to leave to the group. And what are you taking with you?
Can I say something on this?
Please.
I would like to advise, myself and the rest, like it's so important to set up the boundaries. You should be flexible, sometimes, boundaries depending on the situation, but it's so important for your sustainability of your relations, the sustainability of your career, to sustainability of your happiness in personal and professional level, to try to set up these boundaries. Do not be non-flexible, because you should be flexible sometimes depending on the situation. But it's very important to set up this garden. I like this garden. It could be, move, the walls can be moved inside or outside, depending on the situation. But it is, in my opinion, and according to the mistakes that I have done, one of the most important things to have your balance. in everything. So
And-
the
and
sooner,
it's
the sooner the
ongoing.
better. The sooner the better. And don't
And
afraid
so-
to do mistakes, because
So Costas, what are you leaving and what are you taking away from this lecture?
I'm keeping, you know, this picture of the garden with the walls, because this, you know, reflects whatever you say on my mind. So I'm
Mhm.
keeping this picture in order
Okay,
to remember the fundamentals and,
great.
you know, remind my mistakes. And of
Yeah.
course, the corrections that I have done or I should do. This is from my side.
And so maybe you're leaving some of the wisdom of your experience as a
My
gift.
wisdom, I don't know if I have any wisdom. I'm keeping the garden. My nickname from now and then is going to be the gardener. But
The garden,
anyhow,
yes, the
yeah, I
garden.
will keep this. Yes. Yeah, this is very
Samia,
important.
Samia, tell us, what did you want to say?
Yeah, I will have my garden with the but with the gate open. So whoever wants to get inside and learn and get a touch of the things that I do and learn from my experience, I will share with them, and I will leave an open access, open door to whoever interested. That's one thing. The other thing is that I think this conversation has that we had this evening emphasized the need to be responsible and to be held accountable for all our actions, like not to blame others for things that are happening, but taking an active. Somebody talked about being, one student here talked about being passive. I think that was Leor. And I think it's important to be active, to take an active role, and not to blame others. Instead of focusing your energy and thoughts on blaming others, just focus on the things that you need to do in order to fix any and resolve any misunderstanding. So
Okay.
that's what so it's always I would start with observing and explain my need, justify it, and then think about one of the students said also, I don't know, I think it was Leor again. I think he said we should think about a common goal, like something that would be good for everybody, all participants in every encounter. That's what I would take.
But Samia, what do you mean to be, you know, good for all? Because sometimes then it was a question to say yes, but do not say no to yourself. I mean,
because you're working in a company.
How much do you risk this?
If it serves the needs and the goals of your workplace, that's what I have in mind.
Okay.
Because when you work within a team, you have goals. You set objectives for any work for your team. So whatever is good for everybody is good for the goals and objectives of the company, the workplace. That's what I mean.
So
Yeah, but
Samia,
Yeah.
we will have a nice conversation about this in Chania.
yeah.
Because I'm not so sure how I feel about having the gate always open, but that's a different story. That's a more nuanced story. But I understand what what you want to leave. You want to leave that gate open for anyone who is going to respectfully want to come in and learn something or ask about your experience or okay, I think I understand it. And what about the few students that I have left? Would anybody like to share? Oh, look who's joined us. And I really, you guys are gonna win the award. I am buying you a drink when we see each other in Chania. Okay? I'm buying you a drink because you stayed till the end. All right, I'm remembering these names. And what are you leaving and what are you taking away? And then I have to cut it short because there's a time boundary and I don't want to abuse that.
But I felt just like in a light psychologist therapy. But it was really nice because it opens a lot of ideas that I had in my mind, but I wasn't able to quite grasp in a more not physical way, but a more comprehensive way. So
Yeah.
it was nice to hear this and take them now into account.
Great, great. And Alex said the iMessages stating observations and the consequences. Yes. Alex is following us from afar. Yes. And then Mona and Omer, is there something that you're taking?
Yes, I think it put things in perspective. I think like everybody else need to remind our boundaries. Sometimes we need to remind us our boundaries, and it like it clicked for me. Yeah.
I love when things click. I love the click. That's great. I'm so glad. That's great. And then, Mona, is there anything that you would like to share? What are you leaving and what are you taking with you?
Well, I'm leaving that I should start and say no for some point, because I always try to say yes to everyone at any time, all the time. So trying to just put myself forwards, ahead, in front of all of any question or something, and that's it.
And you know what, Mona?
To be first.
It's like, let's say that others are also important, okay? And what they need is also important. But
Sure.
before you just say yes, allow yourself a 5-minute conversation with yourself.
I don't do that.
Yes, exactly. And maybe that's all you need is a 5-minute conversation with, okay, wait. I would like to say yes, but am I going to say yes to all of it? Or am I just going to decide, wait, I can say yes to this piece and I'll say no to this, but I will say yes with my whole heart to what I can offer.
Yes, for sure.
And so guys, I gotta let you go. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, I mean, I have to do my counter offer. I will buy for all of them, whoever's got wants Lucky and Coca-Cola Light. Okay, you will buy the.
No, we'll all go for a drink. That's right. And I'm going to also do something, Costas. I'm going to download the chat, if that's okay. And then I will also add that in the lecture notes because for the people who are following the recording, they might find it interesting to see what others had to say.
Okay. Yes.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Alad, for
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for being here.
It was really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.
Yeah,
Thank you very much,
Bye.
Suzanne.
Okay, see you for
Bye.
Rose mindset.
See
All
ya.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.